The United States and Israel have launched strikes across Iran in what Washington calls the start of major combat operations aimed at foiling the Islamic Republic's suspected nuclear weapons program. Israeli sources say the IDF targeted senior figures, including Iran's supreme leader and its president. The first strikes reportedly landing near the residence of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Iran says the supreme leader is not in Tehran and has been moved to a safe location. Israel has warned Iranian civilians near military sites to evacuate. Iranian forces are hitting back, firing missiles towards Israel and at U.S. sites in the region. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE have reported explosions in their capitals. U.S. President Donald Trump has urged Iranians to use this opportunity to overthrow the government.
When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations.
יחד עם ארצות הברית נכה קשות במשטר הטרור. ניצור תנאים שיאפשרו לעם האיראני האמיץ לפרוק מעליו את עול המשטר הרצחני הזה.
And for more, we're joined by AP correspondent John Gambrell in Dubai and Nick Harper in Washington, D.C., who are both covering this for CNA. John, let's start with you. We are seeing retaliatory Iranian strikes on Israel, explosions in Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE. What does this tell us about the scale and coordination of the conflict so far?
Well, it's really starting to get out of hand, and it's exactly what the Iranians warned was going to happen as these tensions had really risen with the United States in those negotiations over its nuclear program. The first strikes, as you mentioned, we saw were in downtown Tehran, targeting Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and then quickly we saw strikes spread across the wider Iran into southern Iran, where they say at least 40 children have been killed at an all-girls school there. Then, meanwhile, we're also seeing the Iranians strike back. We have seen ballistic missile and drone fire in waves going towards Israel. The Israelis have been shooting that down. Meanwhile, here in the United Arab Emirates, we've also heard air defenses going off, loud bangs in the sky. And in Abu Dhabi, the capital, we've seen one person killed by falling shrapnel from one of those interceptions. We've also seen the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain attacked, as well as attacks in Qatar and Kuwait. All the Gulf Arab countries are coming together saying they're very upset and may take action against Iran, even militarily themselves. But this whole thing really is starting to spiral, and there have been concerns for weeks, even months now, over these tensions that they could spark a regional conflict, and it looks like that conflict is here today.
So a lot of players involved, as you mentioned. So the risk of a wider conflict in the region, is it unavoidable?
That's the real question. We're starting to see some people come out trying to make a push towards diplomacy, but even the Gulf Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, which had reached a détente with Iran a couple of years ago that was mediated by China, even Saudis come out with a pretty hard statement saying that they are pretty upset, angered by these strikes against their fellow Gulf Arab countries. We have seen some calls for diplomacy. We've seen the Russians come out very strongly, saying this was a pre-planned attack by the Americans and the Israelis, offering some very harsh criticism of Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's actions here. But this had been building, and we had seen these talks in Geneva a couple of days ago between the Iranians and the Americans that were mediated by the Sultan of Oman. There had been some hope that maybe that was going to be able to bridge the gap, reach some diplomacy here, but these strikes are still ongoing in Iran, even as we're talking now, and we're still hearing of second and third waves targeting Qatar. So it seems like these attacks are going to go on, and there's no immediate diplomatic off-ramp that's being offered in this conflict.
Well, many thanks for these latest updates. AP correspondent John Gambrell for CNA in Dubai. Let's go to Nick Harper in Washington, D.C. Nick, thank you for joining us. Iranian retaliation reportedly targeting U.S. assets in the Middle East. How vulnerable are American personnel and its bases in the region?
Well, copying, that's always been the big fear from the US side. If it were to attack Iran, what would Iran's response be? And as we've seen, that retaliation has already begun. Iran reporting that it has targeted 6 different countries, specifically targeting the US bases that are housed in those countries. Remember, the US has about 40 to 50,000 military personnel dotted around the region at various bases that are hosted by different foreign countries. That retaliation has already begun, but we have been hearing in the last few minutes that the US is saying so far there are no US casualties. But even though there are defense systems that the US has in place to intercept Iranian missiles, we have already seen at least one successful hit in Bahrain against the US's 5th Fleet Service Center. We're told that it was subjected to a missile attack. But like I say, at this stage, the US is saying no reported casualties. And part of the problem would be is if there were US casualties, if US service members were killed, would that prompt an even greater response from the United States? Because really, the base fear in all of this is whether or not the whole wider region will be dragged into a much larger, expanded conflict that could run on for weeks or maybe months to come.
Now, Nick, what has been the reactions in the United States to these strikes against Iran?
Well, here in the US, it's just gone 7 a.m. in the morning, Saturday morning. Many Americans waking up to this news and undoubtedly very concerned by what they are seeing. We are already getting some comments on social media coming out against the US president's action. We also know that in polling over the course of the last few weeks, the majority of Americans say that they did not trust Donald Trump's judgment when it came to military action. When it comes to US lawmakers, as you would expect, there is divided opinion. And interesting to note, there is both bipartisan support and bipartisan condemnation. So in terms of support, Lindsey Graham, a Republican senator from South Carolina, he is a Trump ally, has thanked the president on social media for making, he says, America more safe and eventually more prosperous, calling the military action necessary and long justified. And the Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, has also praised Donald Trump, saying that he has done what was right and necessary, something that other presidents, he said, had not been willing to do in the past. But there is also condemnation. And Republican Congressman Tom Massey has called this an act of war, again pointing out that the US president has decided to take military action in the same way that he did in January against Venezuela without first seeking approval from Congress. And I think that's the reaction from many lawmakers, pointing out that congressional approval was needed to authorize these strikes. Obviously, the US president once again sidestepping that and deciding to unilaterally carry out that action that has created divided opinions amongst Americans.
Many thanks for that update. Nick Harper there for CNA in Washington, D.C.